Hey, my name is John Santaferraro, and this is The Digital Analyst, where AI makes sense and digital dominance begins.
The Digital Analyst with John Santaferraro, powered by Insight Jam.
A recent MIT study revealed that 95% of generative AI business projects are failing to deliver meaningful results. That's abysmal. When you consider the hundreds of billions of dollars invested, how is this possible? According to the study, the leading cause of failure is not the AI models, but the learning gap for both tools and organizations. Along with the learning gap, companies are struggling to get AI integrated into their business processes in a way that impacts the P&L. While all of this makes sense, I have another theory. The early days of AI are much like the early days of Hadoop and big data, when customers were pouring money and data into Hadoop at the promise it would save the world. However, open source ecosystems that comprised and surrounded Hadoop meant that companies were left on their own to stitch together the pieces and make them all work together. Most companies spent more time assembling than they did extracting value. Fast forward to AI. Even when working with most AI vendors, getting AI into production requires assembly. Companies are left to connect existing data, analytics, machine learning, and applications with their AI stack. Organizations still have to stitch together large language models, small language models, vector databases, semantic layers using RAG. And unfortunately, RAG only addresses a small subset of the AI use cases. And of course, once the AI stack is assembled, it needs to be interoperable with the rest of the data, analytics, and application stack. No wonder 95% of all AI projects fail to deliver bottom-line results. Fortunately, there are a handful of companies that are already ahead of the market, doing for AI what companies like Cloudera, Hortonworks, and MapR did for Hadoop and open source what feels like decades ago. For that reason, I'm excited to welcome Sergio Gago Huerta to the Digital Analyst. Sergio has an extensive background in AI, quantum computing, and data management. He's been a serial CTO, and because of that, he wrote the book, the CTO Toolbox, where he and his colleagues share their learnings from the trenches of being a CTO. Interestingly enough, Sergio joined Cloudera as the CTO just 4 months ago. So I'm hoping we will hear more about how this small handful of vendors are doing for AI what Cloudera did for Hadoop years ago. So grab a glass of wine or a cup of coffee and join me on my Tuscan farm in the hills between Florence and Lucca for the Digital Analyst. A big digital welcome to Sergio Gago. Sergio, what a privilege to have you here on the Digital Analyst. Welcome.
Thank you very much. But what an honor to be here and be part of this podcast. I've been hearing you quite a bit and finally made it to the podcast.
Awesome. You know, I took some time to look at your background and experience. And first of all, I'm wondering, how is it that we never met in the last 30 years in tech?
That's a good question. We both have been everywhere.
Yeah. Anyway, we're here now, but it seems like you've done it all. You've founded companies that are still in operation. You've been a CTO multiple times over. You did postgraduate work in quantum computing, and you teach and lead a quantum program at a university. Tell me about your journey. How did you get to where you are today, and what did you learn along the way?
Sure. So I think it's all about curiosity, and there's always something new to do or to learn. So I think when I was very young, very, very young, one day my father came with one of those computers that run with a cassette, right? I think it was an Amstrad or a Spectrum, the first one. I went through all the stages. And back then, buying a video game meant buying an actual paper magazine with the source code of the video game on paper. And then you had to type everything. So you learned some typing skills. And something interesting happened every month. It was a monthly release. Very often they would have a typo on the actual code. So you would write everything, click play, it would compile. This was basic, right? A basic programming language. It would compile for maybe 30 minutes and boom, it would have an error. So what do? Do you wait a month so they come back with a correction or something? Or do you hack into the system and play with that? So you start getting there, right? And then you had this game that for those who are, let's say, not very young, you remember those old Nokia phones with the snake game?
Yeah, yeah.
So the first edition of that was a basic game that you had the same snake, Nibbles, I think it was called. And I realized, hey, if I hack a little bit in the code, I can give myself infinite lives. So I realize I am not very good with art or with this kind of artistic stuff, but hey, I can create things by typing code, right? And I can expand and do things and experiment and hack into things and build things with electronics. So I built a passion of continuously learning new stuff. And at some point, I thought, hey, how about building a company to build things for others? And I was 17 back then. So back then I was young and naive, but now I am only naive. Um, and we built a consulting company with a few partners, and obviously we failed miserably because we didn't know anything about life, business, and so on. But man, what a master's and PhD in life that we got, right? So when we got back on our feet, we say, hey, now let's try to do it right with the learnings from our previous failures, right? So all the time trying to extend yourself and finding the limits that never come. Or another way of putting it is when you have two life choices, take the one that makes for a better fire camp story for your grandkids. And all the way to becoming, an engineer and a software developer, and then an engineering manager and a CTO in companies as small, then bigger, then much bigger, then much larger. Getting into data science and AI in the early days, getting into quantum computing because that's the edge of what you can build. And finally, until what I'm doing today as the chief technical officer of Cloudera, really driving the world of big data and artificial intelligence.
You've been a CTO several times over, and you wrote this book, right? The CTO Toolbox. And in it, you describe being a CTO as more like a choose your own adventure book, which I loved. What are some of the learnings that you would include in the book? And describe a little bit. What do you mean by choose your own adventure book?
Yeah. So that's a great one. And thanks for mentioning the book. Um, at some point in my life, I realized, hey, my life into becoming a CTO has been basically trial and error all the time. And if you ask any company, any CEO in the world, regardless of the company's size, what is a CTO? You're going to get as many answers as people you ask, right? And at the same time, for people like us, the ones who come from a technical background, the ones who are engineers, the way we are taught, the way they groom us is by being very deterministic and prescriptive and understanding the nuances of the code and being precise. So by the first time you become a manager, usually, at least in the past, they put it for us in a way that is your next step in the career. But that is so wrong because it's not a vertical movement, it's a completely side movement. When you're an engineer, you're looking into code, into deterministic stuff, and it's brain work. When you're a people manager, it's an emotional work. And making that jump is incredibly difficult for people like us, right? So, and you have a lot of executive programs and MBAs and the likes. But if you look at any given MBA, for example, 99% of the students are business folk, right? Marketing managers and sales and you name it. Maybe there's a couple of random technical folks like myself when I did my program. So I wanted to take the learnings that I did by making mistakes as I went, and also got help from some colleagues in the field that are experts in their own things, or the other CTOs from my network, and say, hey, what if we write a book in the shape of a toolbox? So each chapter is pretty much one of the tools in my toolbox that represents everything I would have loved to know in my
Mm,
first gig as a CTO. So at
brilliant.
least I know what to expect, right? And we wrote this book. It kind of follows the structure of, you can be a CTO of your own house when you're a mini CTO in a startup, of your a apartment building, of your neighborhood, of your city, and a country CTO, and obviously completely different jobs. And how do you take care of technology, obviously, of the product, of leading with your executive team, of taking care of yourself, all the way for M&A and corporate development, and things that usually we don't even think about at the beginning. And I wanted to do good for that, because I've been very lucky in life, and been always been surrounded by amazing people that have helped me a lot. So all the proceeds of the book go to two amazing NGOs that in Barcelona, they use technology to make the world a better place.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I want to pick. I'm not a CTO, but the way you describe it, it sounds like it would be good for anybody. I mean, just some of the basic principles of management. And by the way, I forgot that along with all the other accomplishments, you got your MBA somewhere in the middle of that. I don't know how you did that, but you did it. Let's shift to today. I actually first heard of Cloudera back in 2009, 2010, when I got a call from a recruiter that wanted me to consider a CMO position at this new startup called Cloudera. And I had
Mm.
I had absolutely no idea what it was. I had never even heard of Hadoop. I got to tell you, I failed miserably at my first interview because I couldn't figure out what they did, and I thought they were doing some kind of cloud computing. I must have sounded like an idiot. Anyway, fast
But it
forward
was not
to,
it was not that far from that.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, fast forward to today, you started as the CTO of Cloudera just 4 months ago. Um,
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about what made you decide to make the move to Cloudera. My guess is you could have gone anywhere you wanted, and you chose Cloudera. Tell us a little about that.
Right. Um, so let me take a very quick journey through my last few years. I think it was maybe 6 or 7 years ago that I was a little bit bored of the machine learning world. Remember, this was pre-generative AI era, right? And at some point, I got a little bit bored because it was always the same. We used dealing with data and clusters and so on, and machine learning algorithms. The evolution was kind of slow-ish. So I said, well, I happened to sell a company back then. So I had a little bit of free time in my hands, and I wanted to experiment with what's new in the deep tech world that is truly going to change the world as we know it. And I decided to study a master's in biocomputing. Uh, and I was doing the classes, and you have to do some studies on the genome and trying to find patterns and all that. I realized two things there. One is that biologists are amazing people, and they carry the keys of the lab on biocomputing, and that the computer scientists, we are kind of the lab assistants for them, doing pattern recognition and regexp stuff, and on those massive amount of strings. And I remember one professor in a random class came and said, this is what we call an empty heart problem, a problem that scales extremely exponentially larger in time with the size of the genome. So there's no computer in the world that can solve this problem. But there's this new thing called quantum computers, and IBM happens to have a device that you can connect and use it to solve this problem exponentially faster. I'm like, hold on, hold on. This is something that Richard Feynman created a few decades ago, and but it was only theoretical. So I entered in that rabbit hole, and I ended up studying a postgrad, leaving biocomputing, going into a master's in quantum information, and building a whole career in quantum computing, because I truly believe is going to change humankind. Not yet; it's still under development, Uh, and that led me to lead quantum computing at Moody's. And at some point, Gen AI came in, right? So that brought me back into the world of AI. Um, because I think my one skill, I think I have two skills in life. And sorry, I'm rambling a little bit. One is being able to surround myself with really smart people and coordinating everyone to look in the same direction. And two is, I think, you tell me, but I think is trying to explain complex concepts in a way that's understandable, which was quite handy for quantum computing, right?
It's actually quite
Yeah.
handy for this podcast too, because that's exactly what we need. And before you said that, I was sitting here going, "Oh my gosh, I have had a lot of brilliant people on the podcast, but very few that can speak clearly and allow people to just understand." And it is, you have a gift.
Thank you very much. I think it's a really important skill to work on for a CTO or for any leader, right? As communication is the number one thing that we do 24/7. So being able to explain things and understand the reception of the message and all that. So that was quite handy on the quantum world, and then with Gen AI, I became the head of AI at Moody's. We did a lot of amazing stuff. It's a great company. We were the first company in the financial industry with the Gen AI tool in the market, and once that started rolling, and Moody's became one of the leading companies in AI in the financial sector, I got a call from a good friend who say, "Hey, there is Cloudera," and like you, I remember Cloudera from my good old days in Hadoop doing big data, and I realized one thing. First of all, Cloudera was together with Hortonworks, the two companies that merged many years ago. They were the only companies that would allow enterprises to get an amazing technology such as Hadoop and all this clustering and storage, effectively everything you needed to deal with big data, with an enterprise grade solution with the SLAs that enterprises require. So that was a fantastic offering. And then the cloud came, and of course, new players came in, and Cloudera was able to be the company that could offer solutions in a hybrid world where yes, the cloud is fantastic, and you have what we call this era of convenience. With a credit card, you can build create a data science pipeline and generate value. But when you're a large enterprise, you have data centers scattered all around the world. You have data federated, so it is much more difficult to add governance to that, and that has been always the sweet spot of the company. And then fast forward, we come into the era of agents, where we have AI everywhere. Every single company wants to reap the benefits of this. There is a huge push for private AI and true governance and sovereignty of our data, our platform, and our AI agents. So just being on the cloud or just being on the data center, that's not cut it anymore. And when I saw all those things, all those tailwinds, and I remembered, hey, this is a company that was able to create Hadoop, but also to move the world into a modern data architecture process, not just the Hadoop and Hive and those technologies, but also what we call today newer tools that are more in in both the cloud and the on-prem era, but that allow us to work with whether it's Spark, Trino, and many other modern tools or knowledge graphs, vector databases that are fundamental for AI today. This is the place where the shovels are built for people to dig for gold. And we're getting into, so we're calling this the era of convergence because now is when you need to see your whole data state as one single thing and add governance in that. Every single country is having a governance requirements and compliance requirements around your data and what your customers can or cannot do, what your models are, how you verify them. How do you navigate that world? It's extremely complex if you cherry pick components and try to build everything by yourself. So it was the opportunity, and I'm super grateful to be working with an amazing team of engineers that have been effectively creating the world of big data as we know it.
Unlock better leads through Solutions Review events.
Welcome to Data Demo Day. Expert Roundtable, Solution Spotlight featuring Monte Carlo, Cohesity, Denodo, Cloudflare, High Gear, Broadcom, Next Thing.
Boost your brand with a webinar that shares comprehensive use cases, real-time product demos, and an interactive Q&A. All broadcast live to LinkedIn, YouTube, and Zoom from our Boston studio, or even on location. Fill your sales funnel with high-quality targeted leads. And contact us today by visiting solutionsreview.com/virtual events.
I'm a little bit relieved because I thought you were going to tell me that somehow Cloudera was getting into quantum computing now, but it sounds like they're sticking in their lane. They've I saw this last year and hadn't realized that Hadoop company had taken the full suite of open source technology and done in a unified platform what they had originally done for Hadoop, and I don't know of anybody else that has done that. So bravo, good choice to move over there. Let's talk a little bit about the elephant in the room, and I don't mean the Hadoop elephant, the AI elephant. I talk to a lot of people still, and as I read articles and even LinkedIn posts, the hype is going back from overhype to total risk to 95% of the projects are failing. 65% of the people can't even get half of their Gen AI. I'm hearing all of these rumblings, and yet the whole thing is going forward at the speed of a locomotive, and there's no way to stop it. So, what is your perspective? What's the truth about AI? And this isn't a vendor question. This is Sergio, right? CTO,
Yes.
human being, giving your perspective. What do you say? Is AI mandatory, or is it the biggest distraction ever?
I believe AI is absolutely mandatory at the enterprise level, at the small company level that needs to make its own impact in society, and at the personal level. It is, in my opinion, one of the biggest disruptors that we humans have created. And man, what a time to be alive. I used to think some years ago that I was born in the wrong decade, because it was like, oh, I'm way too young to have been in the creation of the internet, right? The ARPANET and all those things. But I'm way too old to be in the space exploration era, right? I'm stuck in the middle of this. That, yeah, we're doing stuff, but we don't even have a proper vaccine for for something like cancer or something like that. So we're kind of an in between generation. Oh boy, how wrong I was. We are in this convergence of many technologies that just by themselves, each of them could be a whole industrial revolution. But then putting together, it's exponential, right? From quantum computing, new materials, robotics, and embodied AI, artificial intelligence, of course, space exploration. So all that together is reshaping the world in ways that I cannot even define how my kids are going to be living on it. So absolutely very bullish on AI, and I personally think that in a few years, it's like can probably count with my hand. I believe many of us, myself for sure, will have a humanoid robot at home doing laundry and folding our clothes and other menial tasks that no one likes to do. But in the office, we will have digital colleagues supporting us. I like to call them Jiminy Crickets on our shoulder, really helping us. We are still in control, right? But we have an army of things that are helping us, right? And I'm going to link how do we get there in a second, right? But it does come with risks. I am not minifying the risk. And I like to use the analogy of when the 4T came into the market. You see pictures of the first 10 years or so where there was no signals on the roads, there were no traffic lights for sure. Nobody understood the rules of the game. There were no proper traffic rules, pedestrians crossings, there were still horses. So it was an absolute danger, and many people died on accidents. And it's not that the car went very fast, right? But still, I think with all the pros and cons, most people would agree that the combustion engine improved our society. as a whole. Right? Again, we can discuss a lot about that, but all in all, it made us, live longer, communicate better, work better, and do things like going to California and stuff like that, right? All that evolution. It's like, hey, when we created the first combustion engine, would have we imagined that we could fly, that we could send a space rocket to Mars or any of the things that we are doing today? So likewise, today we have agents that are doing software development that before it would have taken us weeks or months. Let me take one example. Would I vibe code as people do today, just asking a prompt and getting a fully fledged application, a production application? Absolutely not. But as a product manager that wants to create a specification of an idea and show it to a group of engineers to build it, before we did mockups and designs and sometimes back of the envelope paintings or PowerPoints or Figmas. But now the only thing that a product manager needs to do is create a working prototype in minutes that works, that is effective, and you can click through it. So then a group can go and code it properly in an enterprise grade. Uh, it starts there and goes anywhere that you can imagine. So the question is, how do we deploy in the enterprise these digital colleagues in a way that it's safe? If we think about them in a way that they are like effectively colleagues, people that report to human resources, they have certain permissions and entitlements and accesses, certain capacities and skills, and certain relationships, then things that they can do or people they can interact with. We have those things as humans, either embedded in our ethos or in the rules of our company. We have to build those systems for the agents as well. And that is what we're trying to do at Cloudera, creating this era of private AI, where these agents can have access to your whole data estate according to your rules and the governance layers that you put around it.
I love this concept of private AI because it takes away all of the concerns that people have of giving away intellectual property into Microsoft Copilot or into ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, right? And it's gone.
Yeah.
I mean, you put it out there and it's gone. But if it's I assume that when you talk about private AI, you mean that your version of that large language model is no longer connected to the main or to the external world, so that you can actually then use it as a corporation. And now you're building corporate IP into that private AI. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And I'll give you one recent example. So recently, OpenAI released GPT-5, wonderful model, but it changes a lot of things from how GPT-4o used to work. So a lot of people have been complaining on the release of GPT-5 because some of the prompts and applications and things that they used to have are not working as well anymore, even though it's a more powerful model. But it's like you change the person. So two people are not the same. So you need to train that person in a different way, maybe speak to that person in a different tone or with different words. If you have an experiment, that's fine. But imagine you have a mission critical workflow in your company that does something important and suddenly that changes. Imagine you're a bank and you have your army of credit analysts that analyze your do credit monitoring and analyze your loans that you give and the status of them and make sure effectively that your bank doesn't go bankrupt. Typically, these analysts are very well trained quants or economists that know your bank processes, your strategy, your risk profile. And with that, following your strategy, they execute on their portfolio management. Right? If we use the financial industry as an example, I like to ask banks out there, would you outsource every single of your credit analysts to a company that A, does not tell you where they are, B, can change them overnight without telling you, in a way that they will give you different answers? C,
Wow.
they charge you per word that they give you, but not for the quality of the words they give you. And 4, they can change or remove your service altogether overnight? Obviously, everyone says absolutely not. Not that there's no way that we would do that. So if we think that the model is the heart or the brain of these agents and these systems, enterprises, governments, people, citizens need to have the assurance that there's true good governance and compliance on those systems. And that is private AI. Do you have the models that you trust and are verified in a way that are under control, that you're the one who upgrades them, who changes them, that you control the telemetry, where the data goes or doesn't go, that upgrades and changes and controls the policies around it and the guardrails? If you don't have it as a company, as a citizen, as a human, you're in deep trouble.
This whole private AI thing is powerful. I mean, every company should have a private AI. They should not be using Microsoft Copilot as a great example, or just ChatGPT. And people are doing it whether they want them to or not. They're using it on their computer. They're using it on their phone. But I think, for example, like a consulting company who has all of this IP in their knowledge base. And there's a lot of talk about how consulting companies are going to go out of business. Well, not if you have private AI. If you have private AI, you load your knowledge base into your language model, you retain it, and you start to build new AI services, new data services, new kinds of services that you can offer to people. I think that as an executive, I think every executive, for example, would want that particular. I would want the digital assistant that comes from McKinsey that has all right. It has all of their IP in it, and so that when I am asking questions and trying to do my strategy, I'm trying to work on vision for the company. I'm trying to look at the execution plan to make sure that we're going to accomplish it. I'm doing assessment for risk. Man, if I have the McKinsey AI as my partner, I'll pay money for that. So consulting will only go away to the extent that they don't figure out how to use the technology. But it's got to be private AI.
That's exactly right. And don't get me wrong, it's fine to use some of the tools out there, the copilots and the ChatGPTs and the Anthropics. These companies are creating great tools and they are pushing this industry. And I use them continuously, right? For
Yes.
my own things, for personal things. The question is when you need to do mission critical processes or components in your company or for your citizens, that is when you need to have those very strict levels of control. So I'll give you another example. I like always to play with analogies. Let's say you're looking at the profit and loss statement for your company or for any company. You're deciding, hey, should I, invest some money on Nvidia or another company out there? I'm going to look at their last earnings call and profit and loss and how they're doing so that I can invest smartly. And I can look at that statement, right? Read the whole report, and I can read English, right? I can read all the words. So can the chief economist of a large bank in the U.S. Both of us have the same reading skill, understand the words, and see the same numbers. But I bet the chief economist insights are going to be far beyond my insights. I may say, hey, this looks fantastic. And the chief economist will look at me and saying, oh, you're nuts. That is what I call the skill pipeline. And as you point on the McKinsey bot, right, or the Moody's bot, agents need two things or it's better say three things to operate properly. The brain, that is the LLM that nurtures and creates the system and you need to control. Two is the data that you feed the system that is going to be proprietary. Sure, the LLM has public data from Wikipedia and other stuff, but do you trust that data? Possibly not. You want to feed that proprietary data that makes you unique. And the third thing are the skills, which is effectively like this capacity to understand an economic report or a profit and loss statement. Those skills are the ones that McKinsey, Moody's, the companies that we work with in Cloudera in the financial industry, they use our tools to bake those skills into their agents. We happen to just release our version 155 of our Cloudera AI suite it has private AI and private inference for this, where our customers can now deploy their models, create those data sets the same way that they have been doing with the classical machine learning in their whole data state, not just on some place on the cloud, but anywhere. These Confluence thing on the cloud, these database on the data center that's very old, that was a BI database from 50 years ago, their Salesforce data, you name it, right? The whole data state. And then the skills. We do that with something we call the AI Studio. Super original name. Sorry about that. Uh, but that is how you build this sort of complete context of a true
Yeah.
well-governed private AI.
Yeah, I want to dig down into the technology a little bit too, because I'm seeing a lot of organizations that are frustrated and not able to get the benefit that they want to get out of their AI investments because they're still having to put together the pieces. And Gen AI showed up, and it showed up and with a need suddenly for RAG and for a vector database and 27 other things, now pieces, parts that you've got to put together on top of all of the data infrastructure that it takes that's already a mess. And then you've got to integrate it all. You got to put the pieces together. So it seems to me like fragmentation is the enemy of getting value out of AI, and unification is the key. So what does it take? I mean, people are sick of having to put pieces together. That's one of the reasons that Hadoop went to the grave, right? And I know there's still data in Hadoop, but it didn't solve the world's problems like the promise was that it was going to do. But it was because it was because of all the pieces parts. What do you have to do to create a unified solution so that people don't have to put the pieces together anymore?
That's a really good point. And I think most people forget about the era of machine learning, what we used to do before generative AI. And there's like two generations, those who came into AI through Gen AI, and then maybe the old pirates that were doing machine learning for ages, for the good and the bad, right? And in the machine learning world, with MLOps and data catalog and data governance and metadata, we have been able to talk about these things for ages. Like, you have to curate your data, you have to clean it up, you have to have some lineage and governance on your data and identify who can access what. And only then you go and train a model. That model is in a registry, it gets deployed in a specific way, and then it gets used in production under certain rules. We were able to build that for a period of, say, 10 years of evolution of big data and machine learning and so on. But most enterprises understood that you needed to have this kind of unified system that allows you to go end to end. Cloudera understood that and built that on top of Hadoop, and then on top of other systems like Spark and Trino and other systems, Databricks, Snowflake. The world exploded in terms of opportunities. And in the past, you had basically the Hadoop ecosystem. That was it. Doing big data was pretty simple, but extremely difficult. What I mean is, becoming a data engineer was about learning 3 databases and 2 engines. Now, scaling that up on dozens or hundreds or thousands of nodes, that was a completely different story. Now, becoming a data engineer is much, much more complex. Still difficult, but more complex, because there are literally hundreds of engines, databases, and systems that you can use. There's almost one type of database for each use case. So now you have this dichotomy of choice to pick. Right, so that's the world of big data. And then Gen AI comes in. And with a couple of prompts, you can build something that before took you months and $500,000 of investment or more. And people start creating amazing applications and great stuff that generate wow factor to the CEO or to the boards. And then everyone says, can we have this in production tomorrow? It's like, well, this was an experiment. And taking the last mile is actually the longest by orders of magnitude, because you have effectively built a really nice thing, toy in your laptop that connects to OpenAI APIs and does a bunch of don't get me wrong, valuable and great stuff that look fantastic. But then putting that in production takes the same ecosystem that we used to have in the machine learning era. Again, what is your data? What's the lineage of the data? Who can access what? How do you bring it together? How do you curate it? Probably most of the listeners have heard about the garbage in, garbage out situation.
Yep. Yep.
That also applies to Gen AI, right? To models that spit out garbage because that's everything you feed to the system. So a lot of people thought that it was going to be a shortcut into that, but then the reality is that most companies get stuck at the proof of concept level. And they hit the wall when they speak with their compliance teams or cybersecurity team or with their chief data officer and so on. And I say, yeah, to build this the right way, we need a platform. And guess what? We have a data platform at Cloudera. So
Yeah.
that's back into your first question, why I joined the company.
Want more Insight Jam? Subscribe to our YouTube channel for shorts, panels, podcasts, and more. In your Shorts feed, enjoy a daily dose of best practices from tech experts and leading solution providers, while long-form panel discussions and keynotes, recorded live every quarter, go deep on important industry topics. And don't miss our collection of regular podcasts, keeping you informed on the latest trends. We're hard at work collecting the best enterprise technology information from around the globe, so subscribe to be notified of our next upload. Now, let's get back to the show.
You cannot possibly underestimate the value of unification versus, what I talk about as the integration tax that people have to pay if they're the ones putting the pieces together. And it's completely unforeseen by most organizations, which is crazy to me. They keep buying point solutions, another point solution, and putting the pieces together. And every time they do, they have another connection to be able to manage and to be able to maintain. And there's additional resources and there's overlap between one point solution and another. And the integration tax is worse than taxes in any country in the world. Nobody likes taxes, right? And yet, why are people willing to pay the integration tax over and over again? There's power. There's a lot of power in the unification of an AI platform.
I think it is a hidden cost that normally you only face after the fact, after making the decision and getting there. And as you're correctly saying, it's really difficult to estimate. And unless you have been there, you don't know the cost of that. And in data, we typically call these platforms like building a Frankenstein data platform. You get pieces and all that. And also data engineers, we come with our own choices and likes and stuff like that. Says, oh, I know I want this engine, or I want that one, or I prefer this system. So you end up creating a patchwork of solutions with their own versions, with their own cybersecurity issues, with their own data standards. So it's a build versus buy conversation. On top of that, you add the complexity of open source, because why would I pay a license for this if there's an open source component for that that's free and I can use for free? Like, well, yes, but the reason it's good to use an open source component is not because it's free, it's because of the community that's around that helps it get better and better and better every day. Like in the moment there's a CVE, for example, as a big cybersecurity issue, there are hundreds or thousands of people into that issue to fix it as soon as possible. And then companies like us and many others bring that into our systems, into our enterprise-grade systems, so that customers can use them at scale. Just something like certifying that things work well with your infrastructure, whether it's on the cloud or on a data center, and that those components effectively talk to each other with the right APIs and all that. That's a Frankenstein issue that most people don't account for, and it becomes a really, really big issue.
I got to throw a question at you. It might be a little bit from left field, but you have this great understanding of AI, and you've written a book about being a CTO. You've been CTO many times over. I've read recently that in spite of the fact that 75% of developers, the fact that they are using AI coding assistants, a lot of organizations still are not getting the measurable impact that they want. The developers are working faster. Like you said, you can get a prototype, but for example, no one foresaw the fact that review workloads would increase by 97% because the AI coding wasn't accurate. No one stopped to think about the fact that coding is only 10% of the overall software engineering lifecycle. So what do you think as a CTO, what do you think is the potential for the use of AI across the entire software engineering lifecycle? Not just coding we know coding, right?
It's only one part of the whole story. That you're absolutely right. I think there's a few factors. One is indeed our software is now more complex than ever, and it's not just about the coding part. That's a tiny bit. Now, what are we automating? What we used to do on going to Stack Overflow or internet forums when we had a question about something and bring that back into the code. That is what this is fixing. What other things are fixing? Automated testing, for example. Now I am personally seeing how many companies, including ourselves, are getting orders of magnitude better at our test coverage and automation just by building by using AI for these type of tasks. It is a little bit of an unfair comparison because many companies before didn't do that. So
Right.
we all have seen code bases without tests, and then engineers say, "Oh, we haven't been that good at using AI assistants." Or, well, at least now you can test your code properly, right? But when it comes to uh, the rest of the pipeline, the software development lifecycle, I think it's all about the little pieces. For example, the pull request process when a software developer sends a bunch of code for their colleagues to review and make sure that it's correct. Many companies take days for that piece of code to be approved because of the complexity or something, or maybe because other developers are doing other stuff. Well, what if you could have a bot that automatically checks all that and at least gives you a head start on the triage of that element? But you can actually get quite faster on those things. What if you could use these tools to upgrade your systems? I'll give you an example very related to data and something that we're actually working on at the moment, and I'm super excited about. In big data, especially for companies that have been in data for a long time, we all had massive amounts of workflows that move our data from A to B, right? On your typical medallion architecture where you have your bronze, silver, gold, right? You keep curating your data or you have to move it to different places. That means effectively a lot of code scripts scattered through your organization that random people who are not in the company anymore built 10 years ago. And no one wants to touch that just in case, right? This happens in many banks, for example. And it's quite amazing that the world is still running with those things running. So you have a bit of an older platform. Let's say you're running Spark 2, a version that's now quite a few years old. You want to upgrade to Spark 4, the version that just came out a few months ago. Well, you have to get thousands of scripts and systems and modify them to get them to work on that new version. How do you do that? Well, you put a whole team for months to upgrade that. Well, what we see today is that we can do that automatically in
Yeah.
a few hours of coding agents doing that automatically for you.
Yeah.
So I would be skeptical on those who say, "Oh, there's no ROI on coding." Um, I wouldn't say developers are going away either. I
Right.
think we just get superpowers,
Yeah.
and
I,
that's
I had a
amazing.
chance to, by the way, I knew you would have no shortage of ideas around this topic. But I recently spoke with a company that is building Jiminy Crickets for each of the software engineering roles, right? Jiminy Cricket for the CTO, for the product owner, for the architects, for the engineers, all engineers, right? Software engineer, platform engineers, for the operational team who has to put it into production, and bringing it together is really, and then doing things like intake, right? If you get the intake right, I mean, how many problems come into the software engineering lifecycle just because the intake wasn't right, and you don't find out till you're about to go into production, and you basically now have to go back and rework the entire process. So I'm excited about things like this because I think we're going to see these AI agents that are role-based, persona-based, and then work group-based, and then ultimately ecosystem-based.
Yes.
And it's exciting. These are exciting times, and it's exciting to be a part of this, Sergio.
And that's the magic, right? That these systems, whether they are for coders, for marketing people, for journalists, they are personalized for you, not
Yes.
just for your job, but for you, John, for me, Sergio. And how else could we get that?
Yeah.
In the
Yeah.
same way that we don't imagine now taking a boat to cross the Atlantic, right? We fly. In a few years, we will not imagine ourselves not having these Jiminy Crickets on our shoulders.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sergio, it's been a pleasure having you here. I think we could do an entire show just on the software engineering piece. We might have to have you back, and we'll do that one kind of on the side. But
Anytime.
congratulations on your move to Cloudera. They're fortunate to have you, and it sounds like you're fortunate to be in a place where you can thrive as well. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me here. Super happy to come back to talk more about agents, quantum computing, or any of these fascinating things that are changing the world.
Awesome. We'll do it again.
Thank you, John.
Hey, thanks everyone for joining the Digital Analyst. If you really enjoyed this, definitely like and subscribe down below. If you want to connect with Sergio, what's the best way, Sergio? Should they connect with you on LinkedIn?
Sure. We're in LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. Sergio Gago. I'm the guy with the guitar. We're in the middle of our Evolve season as well, so doing a lot of events around the world. Easy to meet me somewhere in any continent. But yeah, LinkedIn is the easiest place.
Yeah, in fact, that's where you can connect with me as well. LinkedIn, FerraroConsulting.com. There's some information on my company. But Sergio, I'm going to be with you at Evolve London on October 9th. So excited to get to meet with you in person. Let's plan wine or beer. If you can bring me some Iberico ham, that would be fantastic. But I look forward to seeing you at Evolve London.
Likewise, it's going to be blessed.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Powered by Insight Jam.